Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about The Swimmer, written by John Cheever. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. In this story, we meet a man by the name of Nettie. Nettie, from the beginning of the short story, he's this individual who has money. He lives in the suburbs. He lives in a community that has money. All of the people there have money. They all have swimming pools. And life is great. They're all drinking. In fact, the short story begins with a bunch of people saying that, they drank too much last night. So you can see that the people who are around him, the people that he knows, they're all wealthy or they all have high paying jobs. And they're well off. So these people, they're not stressing about life. They've figured out, how to live a good life and how to, make sure that their finances are where they're supposed to be. So Nettie, at first, he seems to be a part of this, community. He seems to be, a member of it, and this community has its own form of language. They all speak English, of course, but wealthy people, rich people have a certain way that they speak that they're all used to. There's a certain way that they behave around each other, a certain way that they act around each other that, that's kind of like just between them. And if you don't live with them, if you don't act like them, if you're not financially capable as them, you might not understand or you might not relate to how they live. So Nettie, at first, he seems just like a normal person, and he's part of this community, and there's nothing different about him. But this all changes. He decides, like, when we first introduced to Nettie, he's young, his body is fit, and he can swim, without, any assistance. So, like, when he's going into the pool, he just dives right in. He's not using stairs, he's not using any type of support. He's not using a ladder of any kind, a pool ladder of any kind. When Nettie goes to the pool, he's just diving in, and he comes up with this idea that he's going to swim back home. Now, in this suburb, you know that a lot of people have pools in this suburb that he lives in. So he thinks about where the house of the houses that could lead back to his own home, and if they have pools or not. And then he pretty much makes a map in his mind, which neighbors he's going to visit. We're pretty much not really visit them, just more visiting their pool, because he's thinking about this river that he's making in his mind where, all these people have pools. I can pretty much play this hopscotch where I swim one pool, I get out, I dive into another one, and I swim that pool, I dive and I get out, and I swim in the other one. So he's pretty much skipping from pool to pool, swimming in each one of them, and he just wants to make it back home that way. And he calls it the Lucinda River, which is for his wife, which is very childish. I mean, this is an idea that a child would have, because, most people, in order to swim in their pool, you have to kind of know them. I have to know you to allow you to swim at my house. You don't just barge in and start swimming at my house. But he makes up his mind, and he thinks he knows the people well enough to do this. And he tells his wife he's swimming home, and he starts swimming home. So Nettie, throughout the short story, he swims from people's homes, and at first, this all seems like there's nothing weird about this, there's nothing unusual about this. So Nettie swims from pool to pool, and at first he's welcomed. The people are like, "Hey, well, welcome. We're actually trying to get you to come to this party anyways. So we're glad, that you're here." and they give him drinks, and he's drinking, and he's like, these people, like, at several points in the beginning of the short story, it's kind of like, these people are annoying me because I'm just trying to swim home, and they're trying to get me to stay in their parties and to communicate and talk to people, and I really don't want to talk to you. I just want to play this game of hopscotch. To him, this is kind of like a wonderful thing, an amazing thing that he's doing, something that he's gonna be triumphant at the end, but it's really not. You're just swimming in a bunch of people's pools. So he sets off on this journey. He's going from neighbor to neighbor, swimming in their pools, and just things start to just get darker and darker as he goes along, because the story starts to change. The story starts to change. The weather starts to change because we see it. We start in the summertime, and it's getting closer to winter, which is very weird because he told us that he's just going to do all of this in one day. But really, if you read the story closely, it's really not in one day, because the story is really telling us more about Nettie himself and what's going on in his life. So he keeps playing hopscotch and just going from pool to pool. And what's really wonderful here is that every pool or every house he goes to swim home, we get a different story. And the thing is, like, you have to read this story slowly to get the background information from all these people, because all the people that he's visiting, they all have their own lives, and they're all going through their own stuff. Some are just having fun, drinking, having a party, having cocktails, and others, their lives have changed. And Nettie really, he goes and tells us, he says, I don't like to dwell on bad news. I don't like to dwell on bad thoughts. So he represses a lot of bad things that happen in his life. And also, he drinks a lot. At first, we think this is just a young man who's swimming and going to a bunch of parties and drinking and playing this weird game by himself. But it really becomes clear that he has a drinking problem, and he's drinking a lot. Like, he goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and he just keep drinking. And this becomes a problem because at some point you're like, how many drinks does it take for this man to get drunk? So he keeps on drinking, he keeps on going from pool to pool, and weird things keep happening, and this is why timing and time is just a big part of the short story, because there's a part where it says, like, his swimsuit is a little bit loose. If you're wearing, swimsuits that fit you, and at the beginning I would say he was wearing swimsuits that fit him, there's no reason why by the end of the day the swimsuit is larger or loose. So that's telling us, he's losing weight, or his figure is not what it used to be. So that tells us time is passing by. And we see his physicality, or physically, he's losing strength throughout the short story as he goes from pool to pool. And slowly we just see things that are just not natural. At a certain point, he comes across a highway where he needs to cross. And he starts to question himself because his original idea is not as pleasant as he thought it was going to be, because when he's trying to cross this highway or this really large road, people are cursing at him, think he's weird, think he's been, robbed or something, and they throw beer cans at him, and they curse him, they think he's crazy because he's trying to literally cross a highway, a very large road, and pretty much it's really weird, and he's doing it in swim trunks, so most people would think that he's crazy. An old man lets him go through, and he makes it, he crosses the highway, he crosses this road, and he continues on his journey. And later, we get more of the story, and this becomes clear to us. We learn that Nettie, he's repressed a lot of his memories, he's repressed a lot of, the bad things that are happening in his life. We pretty much learn throughout the short story that he's been ignoring a lot of the things in his life. Financially, he hasn't really been doing what he's supposed to do to keep his family, in the right direction. Also, he's been cheating on his wife, and the way that he talks about cheating, and the way that he talks about being with other women, it's kind of like a moment of pleasure, a moment of goodness, a moment of kind of like forgetting the things that are going wrong in your life. And so, um, Nettie pretty much, he reveals to us that he's financially, he doesn't, he's very cheerful. So he's kind of like a person, he's in denial. He knows that he has well, he deep down he knows that he has problems, but he's been repressing them for so long that he pretty much forgets, and really, pretty much with alcohol and denial and not thinking about bad stuff, he's pretty much pushed them down. Like, he forgets about his neighbors, his friends, and the horrible times that they've gone through, and what's going on in their lives that might not be pleasant. He pushes all that down. He pushes his problems down. He's just like, a carefree person, and he just doesn't want to confront the problems that he's going through. I mean, he's even told to grow up in this story. In the suburbs, there's a turning point where he has to swim in a public pool, and he has to bathe before doing this, and that really says a lot about him and where he's at in life. Because, I mean, a person that comes from the suburbs and you have your own private pool, there's no reason why you should be swimming in a public pool, and that tells us a lot about what his life has become and where he's going. So he swims through the public pool, and he keeps going on his expedition and on his journey. He goes to his old mistress' house. He sees a young man there that tells him a lot about himself and where he's at in life. And emotionally, he's not available. To him, his mistress was just an object. He just wanted a person, a female, to kind of like feel happy for a moment and then continue with his life. And that's the same way he treats alcohol. And he keeps on playing hopscotch, and every time he plays hopscotch, we as the reader, as the audience, we get a little piece and bit here and there about what's really going on with Nettie and his life. And by the end of his journey, Nettie's old. Nettie is not a young man anymore, and he has a lot of problems. And in fact, when he makes it to his house, we figure out that he's homeless and that he's lost his house. He's ruined. His wife is gone. His kids are gone. He really doesn't know where they are. And pretty much his life is dark, and he has an alcohol problem, and he has no money. And this has all been relevant, and this has all been present throughout the story. Well, pretty much at the beginning it wasn't, but from the middle of the story to the end of the story, we kind of see that this is not a normal person. He is going through a lot. He's just avoiding it, and he's kind of like hiding behind alcohol and affairs and other things of pleasure to not face his demons. And so at the end, he has no choice to face them, because there's at the end, I mean, it even tells us that there's rust and there's no servants and there's nothing at his house. His house is just dark and bleak and gloomy. So that tells us that, Nettie didn't just lose everything in one day. This is something that's been going on for several years. And this journey of traveling these pools, it wasn't just in one day. It was something that was going on throughout several years, where he neglected his family, he neglected his finances, he neglected his responsibilities, and now he's left with nothing, and he's just been suppressing and not confronting his problems head on. And I mean, at the end, it's kind of like he gets a little bit closer to the real world and understanding where he's at in life. But, I mean, it's kind of too late, because everything is already gone, and everybody knows it, because his neighbors, while he was going throughout this Lucinda River, as he calls it, his neighbors, slowly, we kind of get a glimpse that they know what happened to Nettie, of his financial ruin, and of his divorce, and how he lost his house. And a lot of them just... They're sad for him. Some of them feel sympathy for him, but he's honestly, he's been ostracized in his community. And I mean, there are even rumors going around that he's shown up to parties begging people for money. So these are, rich people in the suburbs, that people who have really nice houses and servants and pools. And it comes to a point where he was begging them for money. And this is all believable at this point at the end of the story, because we finally realize how deep his problems was. That, he lost his wife, he lost his kids, they're not with him anymore. And he ignored all of these problems. He never tried to confront them, and he just used alcohol and sex and just being with a mistress and just going into pleasure and things like that to deal with these things. But these are not effective ways of dealing with the problems of life. In terms of deeper meaning, in terms of analysis here, I mean, this short story is packed full of information. I would say, take a closer look at the neighbors and their names and their individual stories. But like the story of Nettie, of what happens to him, you can understand him more and more the more you look into the neighbors and their lives, and how some of the people that he should know, he doesn't know. He really doesn't know, honestly, from my own perspective. I don't think he knows any of them. I think he just knows their names. He knows the households, and he knows that they have a pool or not, and he knows the community enough to get around it. But none of these people have close connections with each other. I mean, the way that they greet each other, the way that they talk to each other, and the way that they plan things are not close knit. It's more like, I'm going to be polite. I'm going to follow the rules of this social atmosphere that I'm in, and I'm going to keep moving on. And by looking at the neighbors, the conversations that he has with his neighbors, you can see that throughout this whole short story, Nettie was always, well, not in the beginning, but midway through the short story and at the end, you can see that Eddie was always going down a deep path, a dark path, a gloomy path that was not leading to any type of goodness or fulfillment. It was just him. Whenever a character is drinking so much, you gotta start thinking, man, maybe there's something wrong here. It says a lot about how some people cope with their problems in the world. This short story because the thing is, like, when people have alcohol, like an alcohol problem, you don't really recognize it right away. At first, even when I'm reading this short story, when I was reading it, the first time, Nettie's drinking and he's swimming, I didn't see it as a problem, because, everybody was drinking and swimming and socializing. The story begins with, they all drank too much. So I'm like, he's right in his, he's right in his arena. He's with his people, because they're all drinking, they're all swimming. But the more he drinks and the more he starts to, he drinks with people, he drinks alone, he just drinks because he wants to, he drinks to make himself feel better. He even drinks when he gets tired within the short story. He even drinks when he needs an extra boost to keep on swimming. That's an alcoholic. When he needs to drink to do anything and everything, that's an alcoholic. And these... You recognize this in the short story slowly. It doesn't come to you all at once. We see him do certain things that, there's one house he goes to. The people are not even there, and there's a private home sign like this. This is a private home. Don't go to someone's house when they're not there, and they have this is my property. Don't come. And he goes to a neighbor's house that had a sign like that, and Nettie still swims and drinks. He wasn't invited, he wasn't welcome, but he still does it. So he does a lot of things that he probably he shouldn't have done. He goes into a lot of people's pools that he wasn't invited to go into. But since he had this atmosphere around him that he's going to do what he wants, he's very childish. And so he looks at this journey as something that's possible, as something he even thought to himself that the people were going to cheer him along. They let him swim, in their pools, but I would more like to say that they felt sorry for him as his journey went along, and they just allowed him to swim in the pool because, I mean, you don't want to confront a broken man and talk to him about his problems, because Nettie was trying to avoid his problems throughout the short story and focus on happy thoughts. I mean, Nettie tries to make everything happy, but the one thing within the short story that keeps us with the truth, or tells us the truth, is the weather, because it just gets really weird where, in certain pools that he visits, it's summertime, it's warm, and he's being welcomed, and in other times the weather is getting darker and gloomier, and leaves and things like that are falling into people's pools. So you're like, okay, there's something weird here, because we can't start in sunshine and warmth and end in leaves falling and things falling into the pool, because that seems like winter is coming, right? So it's like the seasons are changing, and time is a big deal within this work, and it is because he, it's like he was young at first, but he's old in the end. And many things have changed, because in the beginning he starts with his wife, and in the end he doesn't have a wife. He's not with his daughters. It's kind of like he suppressed and pushed his true emotions down so much that when he's pushed into reality, what he finds is just, something that's unpleasant and broken and dark and gloomy. And it's that way because he never got out of the pool, got out of his pleasures, of the thing. Like, he built a wall of pleasure to not deal with his problems. And when he finally breaks through that wall, or when that wall finally comes down, what he finds is chaos and darkness and ruin. And I mean, it's too late. It's too late to fix it now, because he's already lost everything. So yeah, that's my perspective. That's my summary analysis of this work. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.